My daughter thought I didn't see her putting a strange substance into my soup. I switched plates. The moment still burns in my memory like fire seared into flesh. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below telling me what time it is where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second. This story is going to keep you on the edge. Before that night at the dinner table, before my world cracked open and everything I thought I knew about fatherhood was stripped away, I was just an ordinary man. My name is Daniel Miller, 54 years old, born in a small Midwestern town where the seasons carved themselves into your bones. Blistering summers that made the tar bubble on the roads, and winters so harsh your breath froze the moment you stepped outside. I was raised to believe in hard work, loyalty, and family. My father was a factory worker, his hands permanently stained with oil and calluses. My mother stayed home, patching holes in our clothes, stretching every dollar until it nearly snapped. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. Those roots shaped me. When I grew older, I swore I'd give my family more stability, more love, more opportunities than I ever had. That promise became my compass. I went to college, majored in mechanical engineering. And by some stroke of luck and persistence, I landed a decent job at a manufacturing firm. I wasn't rich, but I made enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. And then I met Linda. Linda was the kind of woman who lit up a room just by walking into it. Strong but gentle, fiercely intelligent but humble. The first time I saw her, she was sitting at a campus coffee shop, hunched over a pile of textbooks, chewing her lip in concentration. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment the world paused. We married 3 years later. She became my anchor, my confidante, my best friend. When Teresa was born, everything changed. You don't know what unconditional love feels like until you hold your child for the first time. I remember the sterile scent of the hospital, the squeak of nurses' shoes against linoleum, and the raw, overwhelming sound of her first cry. She was so small, so fragile, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed too big for her face. I whispered to her that night, "I'll protect you, always," and I meant it. For years, our little family was a portrait of something close to perfect. Saturday morning pancakes, bedtime stories, birthday parties with balloons that always ended up tangled in the ceiling fan. I worked long hours, yes, but every night I came home, Teresa would run to the door, arms outstretched, yelling, "Daddy." Like it was the only word in the world that mattered. She was my pride, my joy, my reason for everything. But life has a way of eroding even the strongest foundations. Linda passed away when Teresa was only 12, cancer. The word still feels like a knife in my throat. One day she was fine, just a little tired, and then months later I was holding her hand in a hospital bed, begging God for a miracle that never came. Losing Linda broke me, but worse, it broke Teresa. She was just a girl, forced to grow up far too quickly. She retreated into herself, her laughter fading, replaced by silence and shadows. I tried to be both father and mother, but grief is a heavy curtain. It muffled my every effort. Sometimes I wonder if that's when the distance between us began, if her resentment toward me was born not from malice, but from a wound that never healed. Still, we carried on. Through high school, Teresa excelled academically, though her circle of friends was small. She was bright, sharp-witted, and fiercely independent. Teachers praised her, neighbors admired her, and I believed God. I wanted to believe that despite our tragedy, she was okay. But every now and then I'd catch a flicker in her eyes, something guarded, something I couldn't quite reach. Raising a teenage daughter as a widower wasn't easy. I had to balance being strict enough to guide her, but soft enough not to crush her spirit. I sacrificed promotions, hobbies, even friendships just to be present. I thought I was doing right by her. I worked overtime to save for her college. I drove her to piano lessons, soccer games, late-night study groups. When she cried over heartbreaks or failures, I sat beside her until she fell asleep. Every decision I made was with her in mind, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe I gave so much that she grew to expect it, to resent the weight of my expectations in return. Love, when twisted by grief and pressure, can curdle into something unrecognizable. By the time Teresa turned 21, she had blossomed into a stunning young woman, tall, elegant, with her mother's cheekbones and my stubborn chin. People described her as ambitious, driven, a natural leader. But to me, she was still my little girl. She studied biochemistry, claiming she wanted to work in pharmaceuticals. She spoke passionately about curing diseases, about making a difference in the world. I swelled with pride every time she spoke about her future. But again, there were moments. Moments when her voice carried an edge, when her eyes held something I couldn't decipher, like she was carrying secrets too heavy for me to touch. Looking back, I realized there were signs, the way she sometimes looked at me, not with affection but calculation. The way she asked pointed questions about my finances, my life insurance, my will. At the time, I dismissed them as curiosity, even responsibility. Children are supposed to worry about their parents, aren't they? But there was also her obsession with control. Teresa hated being told no. She hated compromise if she wanted something. She found a way to get it through charm, manipulation, or sheer persistence. I told myself it was ambition, strength, traits that would help her succeed. Now I wonder if it was something darker. In the months leading up to that fateful night, things between us seemed normal enough. We shared dinners, watched movies together, even laughed on rare occasions. She seemed calmer, more affectionate than usual. I thought maybe we had turned a corner, that our bond was healing. I was wrong. Because beneath that calm exterior, Teresa was planning something. Watching me, studying me, waiting for her chance. And when it came, when she slid that strange substance into my soup, everything I thought I knew about her shattered. You see, the reason I'm telling you all this, the reason I need you to understand who I was, who we were, is because betrayal doesn't exist in a vacuum. It cuts deepest when it comes from the people you've poured your soul into. I wasn't just a man sitting at a table with a poisoned bowl of soup. I was a father who had built his entire life around his daughter. A man who had sacrificed, bled, and grieved just to keep her safe, just to see her smile again after her mother's death. And that's what makes it unbearable. That's what makes it unforgettable. Because when Teresa tried to take my life, she wasn't just attacking me. She was tearing apart every memory, every sacrifice, every ounce of love I had ever given her. I used to believe grief was the worst enemy of the human heart. When my wife passed, I thought I had reached the depth of sorrow no man could endure. But I was wrong. Grief is clean, honest. Betrayal, on the other hand, is a poison. It seeps, corrodes, and robs you of the very ground you stand upon. The night I realized my daughter wanted me gone, truly gone, was the night my world cracked in two. It began innocently. I was restless, wandering the hallways of my house as if sleep had permanently abandoned me. That house had been filled with joy once, birthdays, Christmas mornings, even silly arguments about chores. Every room bore the echo of family, but that night the echo was sinister. As I passed the library, I caught voices. Low, urgent, I froze. Teresa, my daughter. Her tone was sharper than I had ever heard in public, stripped of the sweet charm she used like perfume. You said it would be simple. He's still clinging on, Hubert. I need this finished. Hubert Klein, my wife's old business associate. His reply oozed with manipulation. Patience, Teresa. The man is old. Paperwork will take time, but accidents are quicker. A chill ran through me so cold I thought my bones would snap. They weren't talking about a business deal. They were talking about me. I staggered back into the shadows, heart pounding. My mind refused to believe it. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe she meant someone else. Surely not me. My Teresa, the little girl who once clung to my legs when she was scared of thunderstorms, could not be plotting my death. I told myself 1,000 lies to protect the one truth I didn't want to face. For days I carried on, pretending life was unchanged. I sat at the breakfast table with her, smiled when she asked how I was feeling, and pretended her concern was real. But her eyes betrayed her. They were no longer the eyes of a daughter, they were the eyes of a predator waiting for weakness. Still, I couldn't confront her, not yet. I was terrified that if I asked, she would confirm it, and the fragile illusion of family would shatter forever. The next test came wrapped in politeness. One evening, she slid a stack of papers toward me during dinner. It's just some adjustments, Dad, routine things. You don't need to worry about the details. Emily already looked over them. Emily was my lawyer, my friend, yet Emily had mentioned no such documents. I leafed through them, my vision blurring with anger. They were not routine. They were instruments of transfer signatures that would quietly move assets, property, authority, everything I had spent a lifetime building. It's for when you're gone, Teresa added lightly, as if discussing the weather. I'm only trying to help. When you're gone, the words carved into me. Gone, not when I retire, not when I choose, but gone, dead. I set the pen down. My refusal was silent but firm, and in that silence I saw it, a flicker of rage across her face. Quick but unmistakable. In that moment she stopped seeing me as her father. I was merely an obstacle, but nothing compared to the night of the soup. She served it with her usual smile, her hand lingering just long enough to appear affectionate, but my instincts screamed. Something was wrong, so I switched the bowls. The scream that followed still haunts me. She collapsed, clutching her stomach, eyes wide with panic. I rushed forward. Torn between two impulses, the father who wanted to save his child and the betrayed man who wanted to see justice in her suffering. At the hospital, the doctors spoke of toxins, ingestion, a brush with death, but I needed no medical explanation. I knew that poison had been meant for me, and yet, God help me, I still held her hand as she writhed in pain, because even knowing what she had done, some part of me could not let go of the child I once knew. The waiting room was a tomb. I sat alone, clutching my hands until the knuckles turned white. My mind replayed every memory of her first steps, her laughter at 10, the way she cried into my chest when her mother died. Had it all been real, or was I just a stage prop in her performance, useful only until the spotlight moved elsewhere? Every time the door opened, I flinched, expecting news that she hadn't survived, and with each false alarm, I discovered something cruel within myself. I didn't know what I wanted: for her to live so I could still cling to the illusion of family, or for her to die so the betrayal would end with finality. When she finally regained strength, I visited her hospital room. She looked pale, fragile, her hair scattered across the pillow. To anyone else, she was a picture of innocence. But when her eyes met mine, they hardened. There was no gratitude, no warmth, only calculation. "You didn't sign the papers," she whispered. I swallowed. "You tried to kill me." Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. You've lived your life. It's my turn now. Why can't you just let go?" Those words tore me apart, not because they were cruel, but because she said them with such ease, as if murdering her father was simply a business strategy. In that instant, I realized the daughter I loved was gone, or perhaps she had never existed at all. Hubert visited her often. I saw him leaving one evening, his hand brushing hers in a way that was far too familiar. The sight of it churned my stomach. He wasn't just manipulating her. He owned her. He had replaced me as her anchor. Later, I confronted him outside the hospital. "Stay away from my daughter," I growled. He laughed, a hollow, merciless sound. "Your daughter, no, Simon, she's mine now. You were a stepping stone. She knows where the future lies, and it's not with an old man clinging to the past." The venom in his words confirmed what I feared. This wasn't just Teresa's betrayal. It was a conquest. I returned home that night and sat in my study, staring at the family photographs lining the shelves. My wife's smile, Teresa's innocent face as a child, all of it mocked me now. The house felt like a mausoleum, a museum of lies. I wept not gentle tears, but racking sobs that tore from the depths of my chest. I wasn't just mourning my daughter. I was mourning myself, the man who had believed in love, in loyalty, in the sacred bond of family. That man was dead. In his place stood someone else, someone harder, colder, forged by betrayal. And though I didn't yet know what path lay ahead, I knew this: there would be no return to innocence. The trigger had been pulled, the descent had begun. I used to believe that the worst pain a man could feel was physical. A broken bone, a cut deep enough to see the white of it, an illness that pressed against your lungs and made every breath a struggle. But I was wrong. The worst pain isn't of the body, it's of the soul, and I learned that the hard way. When I caught my daughter slipping poison into my soup, I thought I had already faced the darkest moment of my life. I believed that moment, the fork paused above the plate. My heart, hammering with disbelief, was the lowest point, but I hadn't yet understood how cruel betrayal could be when it seeps into every corner of your life, when it strips away your certainty and makes every day feel like you're standing in quicksand. What happened afterward wasn't a single knife to the chest. It was a slow dismantling, piece by piece, until I barely recognized the man staring back at me in the mirror. At first, I told myself it was just shock. That maybe Teresa was misguided, manipulated, or sick in the head, but still salvageable. A part of me clung desperately to the hope that I could fix it, fix her, fix us. I spent nights awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her laughter from when she was a little girl, wondering if there had been signs even back then. Had she ever truly loved me, or was every hug just a rehearsal for this final act of betrayal? I tried to confront her again, gently this time. "Teresa," I said one evening, "if you need something, money, help, even forgiveness, I'm here. But you can't keep walking this path." She didn't even flinch. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You've had your time, Dad, now it's mine. If you won't give it willingly, don't be surprised at what happens next." That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. After that night, things began to spiral quickly. My business partners started calling with concerns. Rumors had been spread about me. Whispers that I was unfit to manage my estate. Accounts that should have been secure suddenly showed irregularities. I discovered contracts being tampered with, documents altered, all signed with a handwriting eerily similar to mine. And then came the letter, a legal notice. Teresa had filed a claim questioning my mental competence. She wanted the court to declare me unfit so she could take guardianship of the estate. I sat in my study, the papers trembling in my hands. The audacity of it, the cruelty, was almost too much to process. My own daughter wasn't just trying to poison my body. She was trying to erase me entirely, piece by piece, until I became nothing but a shadow in the house I had built. Nights grew longer. Sleep abandoned me. The house, once full of warmth, felt like a tomb. I'd walk past the photographs on the walls, family vacations, Christmas mornings, her graduation, and I couldn't reconcile those smiling faces with the coldness in her eyes now, and in the quiet. The questions crept in. Did I do this? Was I too strict when she was young, too lenient as she grew older? Did I push her toward greed by giving too much or by not giving enough? The poison wasn't just in the soup, it was in my thoughts, eating away at my sanity. I stopped answering calls from friends. I stopped showing up at community events. When neighbors waved, I forced a smile but couldn't hold it. Slowly, I withdrew from the world. It felt safer to be alone than to risk another betrayal. But solitude is a cruel companion. The silence grew heavy, oppressive. I'd sit in my chair, staring at the clock, feeling each second press against my chest like a weight. I thought perhaps the pain would stop with Teresa. That was naive. One evening, as I reviewed the estate accounts with Emily, the lawyer I had begun to trust, we discovered a trail of forged withdrawals. Tens of thousands siphoned off into an account linked to none other than Hubert Klein, my late wife's former associate, and I realized with a gut punch of horror, the man now whispering poison into Teresa's ear. Emily looked at me with a mixture of pity and resolve. "She's not working alone," she said softly. "They're building a case to take everything, and if they succeed, you won't just lose your estate, you'll lose your name, your dignity. You'll become the villain in their story." It was almost unbearable to hear. To realize that not only had my daughter betrayed me, but she had aligned herself with a man who had once coveted my wife. A man who, in some twisted way, was finishing a battle he had started years ago. My health began to falter under the weight of it all. Stress gnawed at my insides. Meals tasted like ash. Some nights I'd wake gasping for air, drenched in sweat, convinced I was already dying. I remember one morning clearly. I stumbled into the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked into the mirror. The man who stared back wasn't me. His skin sagged, his eyes were hollow, his mouth twisted with grief. He looked like someone waiting for the end, and for the first time I thought maybe that would be easier. It terrified me to realize I was beginning to wish for the silence of death just to escape the storm my daughter had unleashed. The worst moment came during the preliminary court hearing. I sat there trying to keep my back straight, while Teresa's lawyer painted me as a senile old man, paranoid, unstable, unfit to manage even my daily affairs. And then she took the stand, my daughter, my flesh and blood. With crocodile tears glistening in her eyes, she said, "I love my father, but he's not well. He forgets things. He lashes out. He's not the man he used to be. I'm only trying to protect him." Every word was a dagger, not because of what she said, but because of how convincingly she said it. The courtroom murmured with sympathy for her, not for me. I wanted to stand and scream. She tried to kill me. She poisoned my food, but without proof it would sound like the ramblings of the very man they claimed I was. So I sat there in silence, feeling the walls close in. That night after the hearing, I poured myself a drink, a habit I had avoided for years. One drink turned into two, then three. The burn of the whiskey dulled the edges of my pain, but it also sharpened my self-loathing. I found myself staring at the bottle and thinking, what's the point? If my daughter could stand in a courtroom and erase me with lies, if the world could believe her over me, then maybe I had already lost. Maybe the man I once was, the father, the provider, the pillar, was already dead, and what was left, just a broken old man waiting for the final betrayal. I want to tell you I fought harder in that moment, that I rose from the ashes like some hero from a storybook, but the truth is I didn't. I sat in the darkness, bottle in hand, staring at nothing, feeling everything slip through my fingers. I didn't know then that this was the necessary bottom, the place where you can't fall any further. All I knew was the crushing weight of loss, of trust, of family, of hope. It was the darkest night of my life, and sometimes, before the dawn, the night has to be that dark. I don't remember how long I stayed curled up in that chair, the cold weight of despair pressing down on me like a tombstone. Time lost meaning. Minutes bled into hours, hours into days, but something inside me, some ember of stubbornness that had survived wars, losses, and betrayals, refused to die. It started with a single question, simple but relentless. Why? Why had my own daughter tried to poison me? Why had she looked me in the eye and smiled as if nothing were wrong? Why had I lived my whole life for my family, only to find myself hunted in my own home? That question echoed in me, louder than grief, sharper than fear, and slowly, painfully, I began to realize this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. One morning I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the Simon Klein everyone knew. His eyes were bloodshot, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. His shoulders bent under invisible weight. He looked beaten. For a long moment I hated him, but then I leaned closer. Behind the weariness, behind the grief, there was still a glimmer of fire. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up as a young father, rocking Teresa to sleep. I thought of the days I'd fought through storms of paperwork, court battles, and betrayals from business partners, always clawing my way back. I wasn't weak, I wasn't done. If Teresa thought I was blind, she was wrong. If she thought I was powerless, she had underestimated me. That realization snapped something inside me. For weeks I had drowned in why. Now I felt another question forming, colder and far more dangerous. What am I going to do about it? When Emily, my lawyer and longtime confidante, came by with fresh documents, she found me sitting straighter, my tone sharper. "You look different," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Do I?" I asked, sliding my glasses on and scanning the papers. Yes, less like a ghost, more like Simon Klein, the man who built everything from nothing. The man who doesn't let anyone take what's his. Her words pierced through me. She was right. Emily leaned forward. "Simon, you have evidence. You saw Teresa tampering with your food. You switched the plates. She drank her own poison. That is proof of intent. And now Hubert Klein, her so-called mentor, has been circling you like a vulture. This isn't just family drama. This is conspiracy." I stared at her. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from rage. Emily pressed on. "You can't keep asking why. You need to act, you need to fight. The law is on your side, but only if you're willing to use it." Her words struck me like lightning. I had been paralyzed by love, by the naive hope that maybe, somehow, Teresa would explain herself and undo the damage. But love without boundaries is slavery, and I was no one's slave, not even my daughter's. That night, I pulled out old journals I hadn't touched in years. I read letters Teresa had written as a child, sweet notes full of drawings, her love scrawled in innocent handwriting. My chest ached, but then I found recent correspondences. Cold, demanding, always about money, inheritance, what she deserved. The contrast was brutal. And in that pile I found something else, emails traced to Hubert Klein. His influence was everywhere. He had filled her head with entitlement, resentment, poison long before she ever touched my soup. The true betrayal wasn't just Teresa's, it was his. Hubert had taken my daughter, my blood, and twisted her into a weapon against me. That was the night the fog lifted completely. Grief hardened into clarity, love reshaped into resolve. I was done begging for answers. Instead, I whispered to myself, "I will not be destroyed by this. I will reclaim what is mine, even if I must face my own child in battle." For the first time since that cursed night at the dinner table, I slept. The next morning I began rebuilding, not my fortune, I still had that, not my health, that was slowly returning. I rebuilt myself. I woke up early, exercised, reintroduced discipline into my days. I read law documents Emily provided, memorizing every clause. I studied psychology, trying to understand not only Teresa's manipulation, but also Hubert's tactics. And slowly, I spoke to trusted allies, to old friends, to employees who still respected me. I confessed the truth, not all of it, but enough. Each time I spoke, the shame lessened and my spine grew straighter. The more I faced the darkness, the smaller it became. One evening, as I stood by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily called. "Simon," she said, "are you ready for what comes next?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm not just her father anymore. I'm her opponent, and I will win. There was silence on the line, then a quiet reply, "Then let's begin." Looking back, I realized part 5 of my journey wasn't about paperwork or courtrooms or strategy. It was about reclaiming myself from despair. I had stared into the abyss of betrayal, nearly let it consume me, but the abyss blinked first, and now I was no longer a broken father waiting to die. I was Simon Klein, a man reborn. I had spent months in the darkness of grief, wandering through corridors of silence and memories that echoed with betrayal. Teresa's face still haunted me, her eyes that once held innocence now gleaming with a cold ambition I could not reconcile with the little girl I had cradled in my arms. Yet it was not grief that sustained me anymore. It was resolve, a slow, deliberate fire that grew stronger with every sleepless night. I realized something profound during my descent into despair. Justice for me would never come in the form of vengeance fueled by anger. No, vengeance destroys both the guilty and the grieving, but justice, that was different. Justice was precise. Justice was patient. Justice did not need the violence of my hands, it needed the sharp clarity of truth, so I began my quiet preparations. At first I moved cautiously. Hubert Klein had power, influence, and wealth. Men like him believed they were untouchable, and perhaps for a time he was, but even the untouchable can be reached if you know where to strike. My first ally in this silent war was Emily Carter, a young lawyer I had once mentored when she was still learning the ropes of corporate law. She was brilliant, fierce, and above all, she still believed in the sanctity of truth in a world where most bent the law to their advantage. When I first walked into her office, I carried only a single folder, a slim file with Teresa's handwriting inside, a list of transactions coded, hidden in her desk that I had found in those days after the poisoning. Numbers, account trails, whispers of money funneled into offshore banks. I laid the folder on her desk without a word. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking softly. "You're ready to fight back, aren't you?" I nodded. "Not for revenge, Emily, for justice, for clarity, for truth." The months that followed were a blur of meticulous planning. I had to tread carefully. Teresa still had allies who believed in her innocence, who saw me as an old man clinging to paranoia. Hubert, with his silver tongue and corporate charm, had convinced many that I was losing my mind in my old age, but beneath their carefully constructed facade, cracks were forming. All we needed was to shine the right light. Emily and her team began digging offshore accounts, suspicious transactions, falsified signatures. Teresa's fingerprints were everywhere, and Hubert's shadow lurked just behind. It was almost poetic how carelessly they had woven their web of greed, believing no one would ever look too closely. The deeper we dug, the heavier my heart grew. Every document we uncovered, every lie we unmasked was a knife twisted deeper into the memory of my daughter. But pain became fuel. Each revelation steeled me further. The turning point came when Emily managed to secure a witness, Daniel Foster, a former associate of Hubert's. He was a man broken by guilt, weary of the lies he had helped cover. He came forward trembling, his hands shaking as he recounted the meetings, the whispered plans, the deliberate strategy to manipulate Teresa into betraying her own bloodline. Hubert promised her everything. Daniel confessed one late evening, his voice heavy with shame. He told her she could have your entire fortune, that she deserved it, that you would never willingly give it to her. He fed her ambition until it consumed her. Hearing this shattered something inside me. Teresa's betrayal had not sprouted in a vacuum. It had been cultivated, nurtured by Hubert's venom. Yet I could not absolve her completely. She had chosen her path. She had raised the spoon to my lips. The day of reckoning came sooner than I expected. Emily filed the case with meticulous precision. Fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, still. Hubert's lawyers fought tooth and nail, seeking to dismiss, to delay, to discredit me as a senile old man clinging to illusions. And so I found myself once again under harsh courtroom lights, facing the daughter I once adored. Teresa sat across the aisle, her beauty now hardened into something almost unrecognizable. She avoided my gaze, but I could feel the weight of her presence pressing against me. Hubert sat beside her, calm, smug, confident. When I rose to give my testimony, the courtroom hushed. "I am not here," I began slowly, my voice steady though my heart pounded, "because I seek vengeance against my daughter. I am here because truth matters, because family, once broken by lies, deserves at least the dignity of honesty. Teresa, you were my world. I gave you everything a father could give, but love without honesty is nothing but a shadow." And Hubert, I turned to face him, my eyes narrowing. "You took that shadow and twisted it into something vile. You thought you could rob me quietly, poison my body and soul, and walk away unscathed. But truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply you bury it. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see Teresa shifting uncomfortably, her facade cracking. The trial stretched for weeks, evidence mounted. Hubert's empire of deceit began to crumble, and slowly Teresa's composure unraveled. She avoided my eyes, avoided speaking in court except when forced. Each time she did, her voice quivered, betraying the guilt she tried desperately to suppress. But the most devastating moment came when Emily produced a recording, Daniel Foster's confession, detailing Hubert's manipulation and Teresa's complicity. The words rang through the courtroom like a death knell. Teresa wept silently as the truth spilled into the open. Hubert's smugness faded, replaced with a cold fury. The facade was gone, the empire had fallen. When the verdict was finally read, guilty on multiple counts, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Hubert was sentenced to prison, stripped of his wealth and power. Teresa, though spared the harshest punishment due to Hubert's manipulations, faced years of probation and the irrevocable stain of betrayal. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt the sweet satisfaction of payback, but as I stood there watching my daughter led away, I felt only a deep, aching emptiness. Justice had been served, yes, truth had prevailed, but no verdict, no sentence could ever return the little girl who once laughed in my arms, and yet in that emptiness there was something else, clarity. For the first time in years I felt unshackled. Hubert's shadow no longer loomed over me. The lies had been stripped bare. I could breathe again. Payback, I realized, was never about destroying my enemies. It was about reclaiming myself, reclaiming the dignity they had tried to take, reclaiming the truth that had been buried under deceit. As I left the courthouse that day, the sun warming my face, I whispered a silent farewell to the Teresa I once knew. Perhaps, somewhere deep inside her, there remained a flicker of the child she had been. Perhaps one day she would find redemption. But that was her journey, not mine. My journey was done. Justice had spoken, and I, at last, was free. I sit here tonight, alone at my kitchen table, staring at the same bowl of soup that once held the weight of a choice I never wanted to make. The broth has long gone cold, but the memory burns hot inside me. My story didn't end with the verdict, with Teresa's shocked silence or Hubert's ruined reputation. It didn't even end when I rewrote the will and secured my estate for something greater than greed. No, the real ending is this moment. This quiet reflection when I finally let myself breathe. People often think justice comes with trumpets, with applause, with satisfaction so loud it fills every corner of your heart. The truth is, justice comes quietly, like the settling of dust after a storm. It doesn't erase the wreckage, it simply allows you to see clearly again. Teresa has vanished from my life, like smoke dissipating into the night. I sometimes wonder if she lies awake at night thinking of me, of what she lost, or of what she became in her desperate grasp for something that was never hers to begin with. Part of me aches for her still, not because I forgive her betrayal, but because I cannot turn off the love a father feels for his child, even when that child poisons the very hand that fed her. That is the burden of parenthood, loving without condition, even when conditions are broken. Hubert, on the other hand, is nothing but a ghost in memory. I imagine him alone in whatever corner of the world still tolerates him, a man stripped of the masks he once wore so well. If justice found him in a courtroom, fate will finish the rest. I have no need to follow his downfall. Life has a way of collecting its own debts, but me, I live on, and in living, I've learned. I've learned that betrayal cuts deepest not because of what is taken from you, but because of what it teaches you about the fragility of trust. I've learned that strength is not in clenched fists or clever schemes, but in the choice to keep moving when every part of you wants to stop. Most of all, I've learned that even in the ruins of broken love, there can be a seed of something new. After the trial, I changed my will. I gave what I had to foundations that fight for justice, for truth, for children who grow up believing no one sees them. Because maybe if someone had seen Teresa, truly seen her pain, her hunger, her fear, she wouldn't have reached for poison. Maybe love, left unchecked, had turned into a pressure she couldn't bear. Maybe. These are questions that will echo in me for the rest of my days. But I also know this, I refuse to let bitterness define my end. When I sit here now, the silence is not empty, it is full. full of memory, of regret, of lessons carved into me like the lines on my hands, full of the strange comfort that comes with surviving the unthinkable, full of the knowledge that, despite everything, I am still here. And I write these words not as revenge, not as warning, but as testament. If you've followed my story, if you've seen me broken and rebuilt, then you understand. Life is not about avoiding the fall. It's about standing again, even when your knees tremble, even when the ground still shakes beneath you. One night not long ago, I dreamed of Teresa as a little girl. She was sitting in this very kitchen, her hair tied back, her smile wide, her eyes lit with the innocent spark of youth. She laughed as I tasted her soup. Too salty but made with love, and for one fleeting moment I held her again as she was, not as she became. I woke with tears on my face, but not of pain. They were tears of acceptance, because I finally understood loving her doesn't mean excusing her. It means carrying the memory of who she was alongside the reality of who she chose to be. It means holding both without letting either destroy me. This is my ending, not triumph, not tragedy, just truth. And in truth I find peace. So tonight, as I sit in this kitchen and the soup cools untouched before me, I whisper a prayer, not for justice, not for vengeance, but for stillness. For the quiet that comes after the storm, for the steady heartbeat that says, you survived. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story shocked you, made you feel something, or left you wanting justice served, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Share this story with your friends. Some truths only happen once, and we just witnessed a revenge plan unfold. Stay tuned for the next story. You won't want to miss it.